We're back with another exciting episode of the Legal Brief with me as your host, Krysta Mason Smith, managing partner of Muriel DeSeal & Co. In studio, I have the honor and privilege of having two amazing people. The first being Keith Mason, who is Deputy Commissioner of Police, retired, and the illustrious Roberta Reckley, who is our Chief Magistrate of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Welcome to you both. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Welcome. And so we're going to dive right into our topic, which is legal transitions. Let's talk law and policing. So for my first segment, I'm going to pass the mic to Keith Mason. First question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have been doing since retiring from the force, not only as a Bahamian top cop, but also as one of the most highly decorated West Indians in the Caribbean. Tell us about yourself.
Well, you've given them my name. I'm Keith Mason. I was born 90 years ago in Barbados. I was recruited for the Bahamas Police Force in 1955. And after training at police headquarters under the tutelage of an inspector who was also a Barbadian living in Guyana, Inspector Aline, we came to the public to do our work. I spent 39 years and several months in the force, having risen through the ranks from a recruit to deputy commissioner and acting commissioner on several times of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. I have seen tremendous changes in the force. Much of these changes came about as a result of a man an Englishman actually, who was a superintendent in the Barbados Police Force and was sent to the Bahamas as commissioner, a man called Colchester Weems. And when he arrived in the Bahamas in late 1955, he thought that conditions in the force were terrible, and he set about modernizing the police force by getting one or two places where men could recreate. He built a place for senior officers, a mess. He organized junior officers' mess. He organized middle officers' mess. And started to make the force somewhere that people could have been proud of. And when I joined the Bahamas Police Force in the 50s, there were no women in the force. They didn't come along until 1964. And so we had several years of only a male police force. We did 24 hours duty. We always were in barracks for 48 hours, 24 hours of duty and 24 hours of rest. But that soon changed after Colchester Weems decided that he was going to modernize the force. And we did 2 hours duty and 2 hours rest. So things picked up a lot. When I joined the force, you had no vehicles for patrol. There was less than 300 men in the force. And the fastest patrols you did were on a bicycle. You did a cycle patrol.
Yes, and so we know that a lot has changed from the time that you were policing. What do you do now that you're retired?
Oh, you know, I retired many years ago. I retired from the police force in 1994. And the government asked if I would go back to the police college to do some training. I went back and stayed for 3.5 years and then went home. I managed 2 security firms, one belonging to Ellison Ramin, and then I went to a firm belonging to Mr. Stevenson, and we looked after the United States Embassy and all its embroils. And after 4 years there, I decided it was time to go home on my farm and grow fruit and vegetable and look after my family.
All right. And let me give a little spotlight to Mr. Reckley. You, good sir, have recently transitioned from fighting the good fight alongside me on the criminal defense front line to sitting in the great seat of the Chief Magistrate of the Bahamas. Tell our viewers what this transition has been like for you so far.
Well, Krysta, it has not been as great a transition or change as you might imagine. As you can appreciate,
it's interesting to hear.
As attorneys, you and I practice, as you indicated, alongside one another. And much of our work was based on advocacy or litigation. We were in the courts almost every day of our career until I became a chief magistrate. So the trial process is something that was familiar to me, and as it was to you. And as you know, when preparing for trial, you have to, or for a case, you have to make yourself familiar with all aspects of a case. So you would anticipate what, more than likely, if you're a defense attorney, for instance, what you would need in order to have a sensible defense raise. You would know what you need to do if the prosecution are coming with a certain angle. And obviously, you would have to understand and appreciate what a magistrate or a judge would be looking for, or a jury would be looking for. So in that regard, you would have to prepare yourself for all aspects of a trial. So in sitting as a defense attorney, I will always look at all aspects of a trial. So having now sitting as a magistrate, I would be familiar with what a defense attorney more than likely would be preparing his case on, and what would a prosecutor more than likely would expect to have to present in order to convince a magistrate, or they would have to convince a jury, depending on the different roles and the capacities that they are practicing in. So for more so than anything, it's really been somewhat just a rotation of the seats. Is the simplest way I can describe it. So I cannot say that it has been that great a transition, simply just moving from one seat to the next in the trial process in that regard.
Well, one thing I can say, knowing you, that means that you went into that seat well prepared and well armed to face all of the, I suppose, challenges and situations that present themselves. And I say that not just because I know you before. You know?
Yes.
And so I'm very grateful to have 2 prominent men in my presence here on this particular episode. And I am sure our viewers are looking forward to learning much from you as we chart the course forward. And with that said, we have to move to a quick commercial break, and we'll be back after these messages.
Clint Watson has been the trusted voice of journalism for over 2 decades. He is your first choice for hard-hitting discussions, your best choice for current affairs issues and investigative journalism. It's time to start the journey of relentless journalism. It's time to start the journey of facts over fiction. It's time for the Rundown with Clint Watson here on ZNS, where only the sun covers the Bahamas better.
We're going to dive right into our second segment, and I will pose this question to Commissioner Mason. You are in the company of the man who now, if I may say it this way, runs gun court. That's the chief magistrate. And we know that in your policing days, you also served as a prosecutor. Indisputably, it is appreciated that violence has increased tremendously in this country since the days you policed our streets and prosecuted. Do you have any thoughts on why you think that is?
Yeah, I have many thoughts relating to the increase in violence. First, to begin with, when I joined the force in the 1950s, there was less than 200,000 people in the Bahamas. Today, there must be nearly 500,000. The population has exploded, and everything exploded with it. If you see the daily traffic that is on the road, it's amazing that anybody could get anywhere where they're going when you see the amount of vehicles that are on the road. So as the numbers of people increase in the Bahamas, number of people increase in the city, so there's violence and crime and shopping and all other aspects of life. And so there's no doubt that we're going to have difficulties and problems. When I joined the force, we carried batons. It's a useless implement today.
You actually foreshadowed another question I had, but go on.
Nobody needs to carry a baton anymore. You better have a gun. So, things have changed.
Outside of the increase in population, do you think the communities have had a role to play in the increase in crime? And when I say the communities, that's the communities not working together as they used to in yesteryear.
Well, don't forget our communities are made up of individuals. They're elders, they're middle-aged people, they are young people, and we have difficulties in every area of the population. You have young women 16 and 17 having children who have no idea how to train a child. You have children who don't go to school. There was a time when you had people who ensured that children were in school. They call them truant officers. I don't know if they're having truant officers today. So there are other aspects of community that impinge on the behavior of both the elderly, the young people, and children.
While we both appreciate that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, I heard some young men chanting the other day, guns are on the road. Whatever that means, I mean, I kind of figure I understand what is behind that phrase. Yeah. But in your opinion, and without disclosing the specifics of any particular matter, is this statement supported by the number of firearm matters which appear in your court, which is primarily gun court? If yes, why do you think our young men are so fascinated with guns? And if no, explain your answer.
Well, let me start by saying this. My court, I hear primarily all types of matters, primarily criminal matters. Yes. We do
so
have
it's not specific to guns.
Well, I'm addressing that now. Okay. We have a specialized court, and I have to be careful how I say that, but we have a court that hears primarily gun matters. That is in addition to my court. And so that is an effort to reduce the amount of persons who've been charged with firearm offenses and are still roaming. And so with the second court or more than one court hearing gun matters, or a court that hears a lot of gun matters, you find that these matters are moving through the system a lot more quickly. And that particular court is doing an excellent job. Matters are coming up extremely quickly and being disposed of. As it relates to the issue.
So there's a shift from when your predecessor sat.
In a sense, yes, because there's a court that is almost exclusively gun matters. So, and again, my court would hear gun matters and other matters, obviously, transshipment of large amount of dangerous drugs and whatnot. And then primarily a lot of voluntary bill of indictments come through that court, matters that are being processed to the Supreme Court, just the process of the trial process. Of moving from the magistrate court to the Supreme Court. But the issue of firearms, as indicated by Mr. Mason, I agree with what he's saying. With the increase in population, you find an increase in almost everything, good and bad. With the increase in population, you see an increase in the firearms, and I think that is a result of socialization and to an extent probably proximity to a certain place, because we don't manufacture firearms in this country. I think we all can accept that. We are close to a place where firearms may be manufactured, and there's a certain accessibility in that other place that is different in our little jurisdiction. And in that regard, the access to firearms is something different nowadays than it was 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. There was a time when if persons were involved in a conflict, it may be a rock and a bottle that was involved. Because of the access of firearms now, people are quicker to pick up a firearm, and rock and bottle is now, a Glock and maybe a AK-47. And so that is why you see the difference based on, for the large part, accessibility, because there's so much more the volume of guns is so much more, right? And as good a job as the police is doing, at the end of the day, there's only so much they can do. We live in a country that is, they consider it, the borders are porous, they would say, right? We essentially we're an island nation. And so persons have access to our shores from many different locations. And so things come into this country, and now you see them on the road. And that's why you would see the volume of guns has increased, because they're just so much more available. So guns run the road. I think that comes from persons essentially saying access to guns may be easier because they're out there. And then persons, instead of using conflict resolution, because that is something we lack, I would think, they're resolving their conflict with firearms, as opposed to what maybe used to be fists or rocks and bottles, is taking a more deadly turn.
Yes.
And I guess the more firepower you have, maybe you're likely to win that particular battle.
Whatever
so maybe that is where that term comes from.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. If
whatever you consider to win.
Well, that is just from the terminology used, guns run the road. Yeah. If that is what they're saying, it's probably alluding to the fact that superior firepower, if you want to put it that way, may put you in a better position if whatever conflict that you are in. And then, of course, we have the youth, because I guess there's so much more persons in the media, the way we're exposed to media now, what children are exposed to, it's a lot of desensitization, I would say, to violence. I think there was a lot more appreciation for life 10, 15, 20 years ago than there is today. And that could be a product of a lot of things, how we were raised, who our friends are, who are what we watch on TV, what we indoctrinate ourselves with, whether it be video games, whether it be violent TV shows. So there's no one reason, but certainly there are a lot of different reasons that can contribute.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and we're going to cut to a break right now, and we'll be back. Thank you for tuning in.
Covering the news seems easy, but we put thought into what we're doing. The Bahamas Tonight Access Now, here to inform, educate, and entertain. A new type of newscast featuring social media trends, news from around the islands, Interviews with the people you like, sports, weather, and fabulous entertainment. That's a Bahamas Tonight Access Now with Marcellus Hall and LaDon Davis. Live, starting September 16th.
We're back after our quick commercial break. And as you know, I have two fine gentlemen in here with me. And we're going to dive right into our third segment of this episode. And my first question I would like to pose to Mr. Mason. Now, you somewhat touched on this a little bit earlier, but before and after your retirement, you have been actively involved in the training of police recruits. In your very honest opinion, do you think the type of police training taught under your command is still capable of tackling the level of crime our country is faced with in current times? And I say you touched on this because I remember as a child, you always had the police bat on. Unless you just was hiding the guns from me. But could you tell us, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, certainly, in this modern day, you need far more and far better training so that police officers might be able to do their work. I thought in the day when I was commandant of the police college from 1974 until 1980, what training we did sufficed. We didn't do training at the police college here alone, but we had external training. We had training abroad. We had training in the United States, training in Canada, training in the United Kingdom. And that complemented the training that we did here very well. In fact, we were asked to do training for people from Guyana, the Turks and Caicos, and other Caribbean countries. And they came to the police college here and they trained with us. The first two, you may not know this, but the first two squads of Defense Force officers were trained under my command at the police college when Sir Lyndon decided that he wanted a defense force. He had no training facilities suitable for a defense force, and he sent them to the police college, and we trained the first two squads. The first 6 boats that were...
And to answer you, I certainly did not know. So carry on.
The first 6 boats that the defense force had were boats that were harbor patrol vessels belonging to the police force, and the Prime Minister demanded that we hand them over to the defense force as a nucleus for the Bahamas Defense Force, which has grown now into massive ships and all kinds of modern facilities, which they didn't have at the beginning. So, you see where we started. That's where we started.
It's tremendous growth.
And there's a great growth. But the training at the police college today must be more exacting, must be far more serious, and there must be much more weapon training. There's got to be much more training relating to drugs and guns and remember, I always say, the Bahamas as an archipelago, it has no way that can be hemmed in. We have no borders, really. We don't really know where people are in the Bahamas at any one time. What part of the Bahamas are they coming to? Where are they? Who are they putting off on these keys and islands? I remember once when I was Assistant Commissioner of the Northern Division, I was in Grand Bahama. At nights you would hear these boats chugging along, some of them going up the corridors, up some of these places that were dug. At one night, I sent out some men, and they found in one of the canals a ship unloading a heap of furniture. Illicit work, illicit
Well, you
trade.
know, I thought you were going to say something else, but furniture?
Furniture.
What?
Well, yeah. I'm talking about the 80s.
Yes.
Guns weren't as prolific as they are today.
Yeah.
So they weren't worrying about guns. They were worrying about getting furniture and food and stuff in the country that they didn't have cigars and smuggling.
Yeah.
And we were able to make a case out of that because we arrested everybody that was involved in it. So we have no borders, and it has become worse because we have grown into a more vigorous cosmopolitan. And Grand Bahama, Abaco has grown. Everybody has their own policing. When in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, when I was a Family Island police officer, I went to Abaco in 1959 when your mother was a baby, a year old. And I was the only regular policeman. All my assistants were local constables. But I ran Abaco. I didn't have any shootings. I didn't have any grave fighting. The biggest offense you had was somebody cursing. Or
Well, that is a drastic change.
and I served as a prosecutor with a magistrate who said that there were certain words that we charged people for cursing. He said, why do you find that as obscene language? What is obscene about it? So, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
But a big problem in a country like the Bahamas is that we have no borders. Who's going to stop the guns from coming in? Where are they coming from? Who is bringing them? We have hundreds and hundreds of tourists and people who love yachts and ships and boats coming to all these places in the Bahamas. Who brings them? We've got a big task, and training as it was in 1950, 1960, 1970 will not suffice any longer. We need to go much higher. We need far more training. We are exposed to a lot of technology, and just 2 weeks ago, the Commissioner of Police invited me to a meeting with his Comstat, where he had about 50, 60 senior people. And when I stepped in that room, I was like a child in a game room. I'd never seen anything like it before. And I'm a retired deputy commissioner, so, this is not the age of 1956 deputy commissioner. This is the age of 2024.
Yeah.
Very strong views and very, very good points on that question, Commissioner Mason. And this leads me now to my chief next to you. Now, Mr. Mason spoke about obscene language being a big deal back in the, I won't say back in the day, but in your experience, tell the public whether you have had unruly defendants come before you yet in your court. And if yes, what was that experience like?
Once or twice, I've had individuals whose behavior can be considered as inappropriate, certainly for a courtroom. As you all appreciate, a courtroom is somewhat of a somber atmosphere, a controlled atmosphere. Some would liken it to, to church in a sense, that is where you would conduct yourself as quiet as possible when proceedings are being conducted. Only speak when it's your turn to speak, that type of situation. We've had individuals who have, not to get into any specifics, but persons have, spat in the courtroom.
You've experienced that?
Yeah, that has happened. Sometimes a person, and that's the thing, you have a wide variety of individuals.
Yes.
Sometimes it's intentional. to be disrespectful. Sometimes the person may not have control of their mental state.
Yes.
Because as you can appreciate, they may be going through something, and medically they just may not understand or appreciate that it's something they shouldn't be doing.
Certainly.
They have, from time to time, there's been, not in my courtroom to date, but certainly there has been issues where one defendant may lash out and hit another defendant in the short space of time that he has an opportunity to do it. It doesn't happen often, but obviously things happen. But the security at the court complex is more than sufficient. Certainly we have a contingent in terms of marshals and police officers that can handle any issues that arise. But as you know, obviously, you're never going to be able to stop everything from happening.
Correct.
Right? You never know when somebody's going to do something unexpectedly. But it is, in all honesty, it is few and far between for the most part, because officers who are charged with the responsibility are aware of their surroundings and aware of potential issues that may occur. And because of that, they are always vigilant and mindful of things that can happen. If there's a situation where police officers, they may have intelligence, for instance, and in that regard, they may send the word to the court or the court security, and obviously there are aspects of court security that I cannot speak of, but certainly police officers, through their intelligence, they may give us a warning that, hey, based on a person coming to court today, there's certain things that have to be done. We may have a larger police presence, or we're asking or requesting that if it would be allowed, that a larger police presence. As you know, guns in the courtroom is something we don't see in the Bahamas. But if the request is made and if they think it's necessary, they would advise that, hey, more than likely when this particular person's come, you may see a certain amount of officers that are more than the normal contingent, and you may see officers who are armed. And the reason they would do that, again, is because they may have intelligence that suggests more than one thing. That person may pose a security risk to themselves, to the public, to another defendant. They may potentially want to escape a wide variety of issues. But certainly if we have a request or indication from police when they're bringing persons to court that issues arise, I will defer to their judgment, because obviously they would have information that I may not have, and I would rely on their wisdom in that sense.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes. I think that sufficiently answers my question. In fact, you covered the other question that I intended to ask, which was whether you believe the strong police presence was necessary in the courtroom. I think you've covered that more or less, unless you want to chime in just for 10 seconds on whether you think strong police presence is needed.
The way the court is structured now, police are always present. That's the first thing. There's always at least one police officer in the courts. Anybody who's visited the magistrate's court, at least I'm speaking to that, can attest to that. And there may be other officers who you may or may not be aware of in court at any given time. The complex itself has other officers who, if not, they're not in uniform, are still acting in the capacity as police officers. Right. So certainly court security is in place. And then the Royal Bahamas Police Force also assists in a certain regard, because they transport people to and from certain places. And so again, they're always mindful of how to conduct themselves with the persons who they are carrying from A to B. So whether police presence is required, it is something that exists already. And if it needs to be increased for a specific purpose, that can happen. And yes, we make that happen.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We have to cut to a break. Thank you so much. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Legal Brief with your host, me, Krysta Mason Smith, and continuing our conversation with Mr. Mason and Mr. Reckley, our Chief Magistrate. We're going to proceed to segment 4. So, Mr. Mason, now, you recently published a book You've been writing, you tell us about your farming, you tell us about everything else, but you don't tell us you've been authoring. I understand that your book is entitled Born to Lead, The Journey of a Lifetime, and it is a record of your personal memoirs. Tell us one of your main reasons, tell the viewers one of your main reasons for sharing your stories with us.
Well, 81 years ago, when I was a 9-year-old boy, remembering that my mother had 9 children, I was the only one that lived. 8 of my siblings died as infants in the 1920s and 30s when there were few doctors, less nurses, and no medication.
Wow.
And no vaccine. Luckily, when I was born, they found the vaccine. And if I didn't have on a suit, I'll show you where I'm vaccinated now. As a child,
Just joking.
more than 80 years ago. And one day I was walking with my mother, and she stopped me. I was 9 years old, and she said, "I'll tell you something today that I don't want you to forget." She said, "You were born to lead men."
Yes.
She didn't say I was born to lead women, but I expected that you all would.
I think we included a little
Yeah.
bit.
She might have meant it generically.
Yes.
And I never forgot it, and I didn't know what she meant. I didn't ask her what she meant. I was 9 years old, but I never forgot what she told me. More recently, the day that Paul Farquharson was made a commissioner of police at police headquarters, I was sitting next to Albert Miller, who was later knighted Sir Albert Miller. Now, Albert Miller was a deputy commissioner of police before he went to Grand Bahama to work with the Port Authority and later became president of Port Authority. He was knighted. I was sitting next to Albert during that ceremony, and he turned to me and said, "Tell me something, Keith. Have you written that book yet?" No. Why would Albert Miller ask me if I've written that book yet? I never talked to him. I never discussed a book with him. And suddenly he asked me if I've written that book yet. Actually, his daughter, who sat on the next side of him, said to him, "Well, Albert, how you could ask anybody about writing a book and you never wrote a book in your life?" That I never forgot. And at some stage of my retirement, I decided to put what my mother said to me in a book. And I wrote.
Show it to the camera. Boy,
There it
looking
is.
sharp.
There's a story
Show it to
behind.
my camera.
There's a story behind the picture on the cover of this book. It was taken when I led the 1984 police parade from the Methodist Church in Freeport. And somebody took this picture of me heading the parade. On the parade was a reservist by the name of Wright. Many of the reserves in those days were men who left the army, and they wanted the uniform. They wanted to wear uniform later on. So they either came to the police force, went to the prison, joined the immigration or the customs, so they would have some form of uniform. Wright joined the reserves. And on our way from the Methodist Church back to the parade ground in the center of Freeport, he fell off the parade. Somebody ran up to me and said, "Chief, one of your men fell off." One said, "Well, a man falling off isn't anything strange. Plenty of people follow the parade. He said, that's not all.
Oh, Lord.
But he's dead.
Oh.
So Wright died on that parade, and I never forgot that.
Mm.
But I was prompted to write the story of my life, and especially about my career and my family, which includes you, by the way.
I'm honored, for the record.
And I got Alison, your aunt, my second daughter, to sit down and write while I talk. And I talk and she wrote, and I talk and she wrote, and this book came up.
Yes.
We went over it, and here it is today.
Well, you heard it here, viewers. Make sure you, I guess, go on Amazon.com. I know that it's on there. But it will also be coming to some local stores in the
It
very
certainly
near.
will be.
In the
And
very
as you know, there is the launch on Sunday.
Yes. Yes, we're having a book launch, and some serious promotion will be happening. So look out for it. The entire family is very proud of Mr. Mason.
And if you would permit me to say a few more words relating to this book.
Very well. Very brief though, because I got
this can be brief. I wanted to convey to young people working in these uniform branches that their duty was to the people of this country, to their country, and by dedication and loyalty, and by being honest. I saw some incidents recently that give me very much concern, with uniformed people being charged before the court for dishonesty. And that's a no-no. No man who hopes to join the police force or who has joined the police force should expose himself to criminal behavior.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Strongly said.
Well said.
And well said.
Well said.
And very quickly before we go to our break, Chief Magistrate, tell the public whether your elevation and transitioning to the bench has in any way reshaped your views on criminal defense work. I mean, did you ever think to yourself, I must have been insane minding Krysta to them and this criminal defense stuff? Has that ever come to the forefront of your mind since your elevation?
The short answer to that is no.
Good to know.
Yeah, no.
I was hoping that was the answer.
Again, it's still, no matter where you sit, we all practice within the same field. It's still the legal field. If we're talking specifically about the practice of criminal law, everybody has a role to play at all times.
Correct.
Defense attorney, the prosecutor, the magistrate, or the judge. And any one of those persons should be able to play any of those roles or operate in any of those capacities, because essentially we've all studied and trained as reference to the same discipline. So no, it hasn't changed my view of the criminal defense work in any regard. It certainly has grown an appreciation where I sit now for all other aspects, because as you can appreciate, I did primarily defense work. I appreciate a lot more what the police at the investigative stage have to go through to bring a case to court. I appreciate what prosecutors certainly have to go through, having to prosecute numerous cases and be prepared for numerous cases on a day. And certainly I have a greater appreciation, intimate knowledge now what each magistrate has to go through. Having now have anywhere from 10 to 20 cases a day to adjudicate, and having to listen to both the defense and the prosecutors and make a decision that is sound in law and fair to all parties at the end of the day. So I think I've got a greater appreciation for all aspects of it. Certainly not to the position I'm saying, well, I'm glad I didn't do that, or I can't believe I did that at one point. No,
I'm happy with that answer. And with that said, we go to our next commercial break. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome back, welcome back. What an exciting and informative time we've had so far. And in closing out this particular episode, there are just two more questions I'm going to trouble our guests with. First, Chief Magistrate, I am made to understand that insofar as civil jurisdiction is concerned, there has been an increase in, I suppose I want to phrase it the right way, but magistrates can now deal with claims up to $20,000, if I am saying that correctly, when it used to be a cap of $5,000. Can you tell us about that? Is that so?
That is correct. You are correct in that information. There was a cap previously of $5,000. Magistrates can now deal with claims of up to $20,000 as it relates to civil matters. That has been in effect. Essentially, the Chief Justice would have, in his speech at the opening of the legal year, would have mentioned it, and a lot of people aren't aware of it. You're one of the few who happen to be keeping abreast. So for those of you who don't know,
I try.
so a lot of persons were frustrated because you may have a claim of $8,000, $10,000, and you find a lot of times people would forego $4,000 or $5,000 and settle for the $5,000 because they know in the magistrate courts the system moves a bit quicker than in the Supreme Court, where you would have to go if the claim was over $5,000. And I'm not knocking the Supreme Court, but I think we can appreciate that claims take longer to process in the Supreme Court, right? That's somewhat common knowledge.
Yes.
But now, with an increase up to $20,000,
And it's more expensive for the claimant.
and cost is much more. That is correct again, Ms. Mason Smith. In the Supreme Court, in the magistrate court, attorneys now can also charge up to $1,500. Before, they were capped at $500. So it's an increase for both attorneys and also for the claimants or a plaintiff. And what we see with that now, we are seeing a lot of new claims coming in because persons are taking advantage of it. That frustration is gone. And again, that speed and with a just decision, you're still getting at the magistrate court. So you have the benefit of getting a lot more at the claim stage, $20,000 now, and it's still taking a lot less time because you're still getting the time a regular magistrate civil matter would take to proceed. So you are correct in that. And thank you for asking that, because I think that's something the public needs to know.
That's a good move for this Commonwealth.
It is.
And you're correct. I think it's important for us to share that information with the wider public, because I'm certain that many are still in the dark about that.
Okay. Well, thanks to you, they know now.
Yes. And you. Thank you so much. And Mr. Mason, the author, I have one final question for you as we close out. As you know, the Royal Bahamas Police Force has come under heavy criticism in recent times due to what has been described as unlawful police killings. We have no doubt witnessed many who took an oath to serve and protect, finding themselves before the very same courthouses they took others into. As one of the most highly decorated officers this Commonwealth has ever seen, carrying the honors OD, MBE, LVO, and QPM, give an encouraging word to the good apples in the Royal Bahamas Police Force who may be feeling discouraged because of many distasteful reports in the media about their colleagues. Give them an encouraging word.
Well, I am firmly committed to following what the members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force do, and I encourage them to continue to do their work. I am not encouraging any police officer to kill anybody unlawfully, but if it becomes necessary, it's necessary.
Well, that makes it lawful.
If it's lawful, and there are many instances when police officers have got to take stringent action before they themselves are killed. So, I'm firmly behind the police. I'm firmly behind the commissioner, his deputy, and his officers, and I hope they do as well as they can to keep this country safe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mason. You heard it here from the lips of Commissioner Mason. He is behind the police. And I think the operative word that we must focus on is lawful.
Lawful, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That is what I understand him to be saying.
Yes. And just for the viewers,
Yes.
lawful. That's what we're standing behind.
Yeah.
And so for those who, need encouraging, you've heard it here. Follow those in authority, and you act as you ought to in any given situation. And with that said, this concludes our episode. I want to just thank you for staying tuned, and I want to thank our guests for giving the viewers their time. Until next time, this is The Legal Brief with Krysta Mason-Smith.